overview of our company, which is Veritau, and the graduate opportunities that are available with us, and just give you an insight into what it's like to work for a local authority shared service. So you just switch slides, Tom. First up, just to introduce us, so I'm Catherine Cassidy, and I'm an Information Governance Officer here at Veritau. And I'll explain what information governance is a little bit later. We're also joined by Charlotte Joblin, who's a trainee internal auditor. She's also a York St John graduate as well. And we're also joined by Hannah Lindup, who's our marketing and communications officer. All three of us joined Veritau through our graduate trainee programme, though all through kind of different disciplines. So we'll also be able to give you a bit of an insight and an overview of all our different services. But first, I'll talk about the company itself as a starter. Thanks, Tom. Cheers. So Veritau is a shared service local authority company, which basically means that we're owned by councils, owned specifically by councils in North Yorkshire and in the North East, so not all of them. And we provide three main services for our clients, and those services are internal audit, which is our biggest area, counter-fraud and information governance. And you'll see when we go into a bit more detail about them that these three areas are quite closely interlinked, and they're all to do with kind of providing assurance for our clients and making sure that they're compliant with the law. Training is a really big part of our company and our company culture. Like I said, we've all come through Veritau on the graduate trainee programme. This is a 2-year programme in which you're taught all of the skills of your specific service. You'll also work towards professional qualification at the same time, which the company pays for. And you get paid study leave to do that as well. So you're fully supported when you're doing that. And then once you get to the end, you qualify as a fully fledged officer in that particular service. So I finished my 2 years back in March of this year. So then I qualified to be a fully fledged information governance officer at that point. As well as kind of trainees and graduates, we've also got quite a wide range of experienced colleagues who've joined us from other areas of the public sector and other areas of the private sector as well. So we've got quite a big wealth of people and experiences within the company, which is really good. It's a good melting pot of different people. And in terms of flexible working, we are a very flexible company. This is even more obvious now, I suppose, now that we've got COVID and everyone's working from home. At the moment, everyone in Veritau is full-time working from home, probably until at least January of next year. But we've always had capacity for working from home or working in an office where we need to. And we've got a few workers who are full-time remote workers anyway, regardless of COVID as well. So there is different opportunities and accommodations that we can make depending on your preferences and your situation. We also work on flexi time, which means that you can effectively choose your own start and end time as long as you put in your hours. I tend to prefer starting early and finishing early, but there's other people who'd rather start a little bit later and work a little bit later, just depending on your own preference. And now Hannah's going to talk a bit about our client base.
Cool, thanks, Catherine. So as Catherine said, all of our clients are public sector, and we work with a lot of local authorities who own our service, but we have a lot of other clients as well. There's over 500 in total. A lot of those are schools. We've got schools right across the country, mainly with the information governance work that Catherine will chat to you about in more detail a bit later on. And we also work with things like housing associations, national parks, fire authorities, children's trusts, town councils and other smaller councils. Basically anything that fits under the public remit we can have in our client base. So it means that the work we do is really quite varied. You're never really doing the same thing from one day to the next, and even 1 hour can be quite different from the next hour. It really is a good variety of work that we get to do, and even if you're doing the same type of work, it will be quite different based on what client you're doing it for. So a piece of audit work that you do for one of our councils might be completely different from a piece of audit work that you do for a school. So you get that variety as well, and you get to meet a lot of new people at these places. When we could actually go in person, we would sometimes travel around the country or the county to visit our different clients, and it's quite nice to get that variety in our work. And kind of echoing what Catherine said as well about everything being flexible, we really hold those public sector values, being a public sector shared service. So we've got the flexi time, the flexible working culture, and also just that kind of public sector culture where everyone's very friendly, everyone's helping each other out. It's not a really corporate environment, and we have a really good pension because we're public sector. We're also an investor in people, which means that we really prioritise training and development of our staff. I'll hand you over to Charlotte to tell you more about internal audit.
Yeah, so I feel like internal audit is potentially a bit of an unknown to some people. I certainly didn't know what it was before I started working for Veritau, so it's definitely opened my eyes as to what internal auditors do on a day-to-day basis. But basically, it's all about providing assurance and advice to our clients through the audits that we do. And this is to help them improve their day-to-day operations, processes and procedures that they have in place. As Hannah said, the work that we do is really varied, and that definitely goes for internal audit as well. So we complete audits in sort of all departments of the councils, as well as the different organisations that Hannah mentioned as well. So one day you could be doing sort of a social care audit, the next day you could be doing a finance-based audit. So it is really, really varied work, and that's one of the things I really like about it. They can also sort of be tailored to your personal interests at Veritau as well. So I'll just give you a couple of examples of things that I've done that I've really enjoyed. So one of my favourite audits that was in November last year when I went to the Yorkshire Dales National Park and went there for a week to do a HR-based audit. And that was a really interesting week of audit work. It was, away from the office, something a bit different to what we usually do. It tied in really well to my degree as well, which is why I wanted to put myself forward for that one. So I studied tourism at York St John, and obviously the national parks are amazing for tourism, and it was an incredible location as well and landscape to work from. So that was a really good audit that I enjoyed. And another aspect that I've really enjoyed is the schools work. So that's another example of something a bit different that we do that you might not initially think of when you think of audit. So we work with sort of primaries and secondary schools around North Yorkshire, and some others as well. We also work with academies a bit further away and different organisations like that. So I work with children on the side of this job. I'm a gymnastics coach, so that was another particular interest of mine. So I wanted to put myself forward for the schools work because of that. So far, I've been to a few primaries and secondaries. Obviously, at the moment, we're doing our work remotely, but usually we would go out to schools and see them and complete the audits there. And they're just sort of a couple of examples of how varied the audit work can be, and how they can be sort of tailored to your interests as well. If there's something you are particularly interested in, it is a good company to kind of allow that in your work as well. Risk management is also a key element of internal audit. So we plan our audits based on risk. So the higher risk areas will sort of audit maybe more often, and the lowest risk ones will still do, but maybe less often than the high risk areas. And we also think about the potential risks during the audit as well as when we're writing the reports. And we also evaluate and test the controls that clients have in place. This is a big part of the audit. So each audit we'll evaluate what they've got in place, whether there's any sort of improvements that could, we'll test those controls and produce a report based on those findings. Sorry if you can hear that, that's just my mum. So in the end, we'll write a report where our findings are presented to the clients, and they can then agree actions which they'll implement to improve their operations and processes. Yes, and that's a really rewarding part as well, being able to help improve their processes and their operations as well. So just to sort of conclude, audit is a really interesting and varied area to work, with lots of opportunities to develop your communication, analysis, investigative skills, as well as work with a really huge range of people and organisations. So yeah, it's kind of a summary of internal audit. So yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about counter fraud. So my role is marketing and communications, but before I moved into that, I worked in the fraud team. So I came through the graduate trainee program, which lasts for 2 years, and then you become a qualified officer. So in this case, I was a qualified investigator. We investigate basically any kind of fraud that can affect our councils. Largely that's working with the local authorities because they kind of unfortunately suffer the highest levels of fraud. And the types of things we might look at are council tax fraud, which is when people might exaggerate or lie about their circumstances to get a discount on their council tax bill, which doesn't sound like it would have that much effect, but it really, really does add up. When this is happening, it can happen quite a lot across our different councils, and the value really adds up. So we investigate that fraud and try to basically recover the amount of money for the councils, and every year we recover hundreds of thousands of pounds for our councils across all areas of fraud. So it is a really important thing that we do, I feel, because you can get that taxpayers' money back to where it should be and helping the people in that community. And that's kind of the theme that runs through all the types of fraud. So there's housing fraud, social care fraud, parking fraud, business rates fraud, and then internal fraud, which is quite an interesting one. So that's where occasionally staff members at our clients might commit fraud against their employer, or sometimes things like theft. So we would work with human resources in those cases, work quite closely with them if there's maybe some sort of disciplinary investigation involved. So there's a massive variety in the work that we do here. All those areas are quite different, and there are more as well. We do school admissions fraud, different things like that, which all you kind of do different cases all at once. You've probably got somewhere between 20 and 30 cases at any time when you're a qualified officer, less when you're a trainee, but you've always got a really good variety. You wouldn't just be working on one thing, which is what I really liked about the role. And we also do fraud prevention work and awareness. So that's maybe more sort of proactive stuff. We don't just investigate fraud when it comes in. We work with our clients to try and stop it happening in the first place. So sometimes that might involve working with our audit colleagues to kind of advise on processes and how they can shape things our clients to make sure that not as much fraud comes through, and raising awareness of the types of fraud that people will see as well, because a big part of our job is that we need to get people to report fraud to us. So we go around our clients doing kind of awareness presentations like the picture you see on the slide, and going through the types of fraud, how they might spot them, and making sure that we keep a good relationship with them so that they can report the fraud to us and we can continue to do our work. It's a public facing role in fraud. We do, or before COVID, we did home visits occasionally and interviews, which are under caution. So all the same rules that the police follow. So when we got enough evidence that somebody might have attempted to commit fraud against the council, say a resident, then we can either visit their home or call them in for an interview. So it's quite an interesting and very varied role, and you get to meet lots of different people, which is really good for that variety in your work. I'll pass you over to Catherine, who's going to talk to you about our other main area, information governance.
Yeah, so information governance is our last kind of big area of services that we provide. So information governance is all about looking after data and making sure that the data that organisations hold and process and share and use, that it's compliant with the law. This is especially important in terms of personal data that our clients hold, so data that relates to an identifiable individual. We're really concerned about making sure that that data is processed legally and is processed safely. What that basically means is, especially for our client councils and our school councils, where council clients and school clients, we're giving them advice about how to process the data and help them on a strategic level. So writing them policies, having a look at how they actually process the data and what they're doing with it, who they're sharing it with, that kind of thing. So if they ever were inspected by a regulator or had a complaint against them, that they could, deal with that appropriately. We also advise them on a more operational level as well. So we'll provide them specific advice on things like requests for personal information, freedom of information requests as well. We deal with a whole host of those different types of requests, especially for some of our bigger councils, which deal with things like social care and all the issues that come around with that, and all the quite highly sensitive personal data that you deal with in terms of those kinds of areas. So we'll help them make decisions about what kind of information should go out to any applicants who ask for it, and making sure that information is exempt and withheld where it needs to be. Again, with freedom of information requests, so requests not necessarily about personal information, but just requests for information that is held by one of our clients, and we'll help them process those requests and advise on any exemptions or any kind of appropriate steps that they need to take if they have those kinds of requests. And then we also deal with data breaches that any of our organisations report to us. So we'll give them immediate recommendations for any breaches that happen. And when I say breaches, that could be anything, basically anything bad that's happened to personal data. So if you lose personal data, if it goes missing in the post, if it gets burnt in a fire, if someone steals it, if someone hacks into your systems, any sort of situation like that where data has gone missing or has been used inappropriately, we'll help our organisations deal with it by giving them kind of immediate actions to take in the first instance, and then we'll do more of an in-depth investigation, especially for more serious data breaches where you need some long-term learning from that event. So that's a bit of an overview of information governance. I think Charlotte's going to talk to you a little bit about her kind of path in, as a York St John's trainee.
Yeah, so I just thought I would give sort of a brief overview of my journey from YSJ to Veritau, and hopefully sort of relate it a bit more to you guys, being from YSJ myself. So I finished studying tourism management and marketing last May, and I graduated in November of last year. So I'm still quite a new trainee. I spent my third to as many jobs as possible, really, all up and down the country. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was kind of just trying to apply for jobs and hope that I would sort of get one in the end, get a graduate role. So it's kind of difficult trying to choose a particular area because I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. I didn't have a clear path in mind. So I kind of wrote countless application forms, went to a number of sort of interviews, assessment days. Just FYI on that, I wouldn't recommend doing that in your third year. Focus on your uni work. It was quite stressful doing all that on top of my dissertation, uni work, part-time job, everything like that. So I'd recommend really looking into the job descriptions and figuring out which ones you think you might enjoy the most, which ones you think you might get the most out of, and just applying to sort of a select few rather than just applying to loads like I did. Anyway, so I eventually saw an advert for a trainee internal auditor at Veritau, and it was in my hometown of Northallerton, which I was really surprised at because a lot of the roles I was applying to were sort of in London or Manchester, you know, the big cities where a lot of the graduate jobs are. So I was really surprised to find one pretty much on my doorstep. Initially, I wasn't sure if the job was for me. It's not something that I'd ever considered doing. I never saw myself being an internal auditor, but I sort of looked on anyway, read through the job description, and I realised that a lot of the skills they were asking for I actually did have. So I think my perception of internal audit initially was quite different to what it is. So a lot of the skills that they wanted were sort of research, analysis, communication, investigating, investigative skills, and like sort of writing skills and verbal communication as well. So these are skills that I'd all developed from uni, and it's not sort of, I initially thought I might need to have done accounting or something finance focused, but it really wasn't that at all. It's just sort of your analysis, your research, writing skills, which obviously uni puts you in a really, really good position to develop those skills. So even if you have no prior knowledge of the area, don't feel as though you can't apply, because, you know, the case with me, I didn't have any knowledge at all of internal audit, come from, you know, a tourism background, completely different. And it's ended up, you know, I've got the job and I'm doing okay in it. So yeah, don't be put off by just because you don't have any knowledge of the area or anything like that. So I got the job and I started in July, so July last year, so 2 months after I'd finished studying. And like I said, I was completely wrong about the perception I had of internal audit. So first of all, like I mentioned, it's not purely finance focused. Obviously, we audit sort of every area, so there's going to be some sort of, you know, the revenues department, the debtors department, we're going to audit those areas. But a lot of the work that we do is so varied, and like I said, you can do sort of social care audits, you can do transport environmental audits, loads of different things. And I think finance is also more closely associated with external audit, which some people, I guess, might not know the difference. So external audit is more focused on sort of the financial statements and that side of things, whereas internal audit, we literally look at everything. Like we'll work with sort of every department, every aspect of the councils rather than just the financial statement. So I prefer that. I think it's a lot more interesting personally. So my first year, for example, I did 2 finance audits, and the rest were in completely different areas, such as social care and different areas like that. And we also work a lot with clients rather than against, which initially I kind of heard the word audit and thought, oh, maybe we're kind of working against the clients and sort of trying to catch them out. And it's not like that at all. We're really working with them. to try and help them improve. And in my experience, they really do understand that, like they know that we're there to just help them and to sort of work with them. So that's really nice. And we do build really good relationships with our clients when we're doing the audits as well, which is nice. So my favourite aspects about working for Veritau include how varied the work is, which I've already explained. The people, definitely the people. When we are in the office, it's a very friendly, sort of supportive environment, which is really nice. Obviously, at the moment we're working from home, but we're still sort of maintaining connections with colleagues by doing like virtual team meetings and things like that to make sure we're all still in contact with each other. The locations as well work really well for me. So I live in Northallerton and we have a main office in Northallerton, and the other main office is in York, which is obviously where I went to university. So they're really good locations. We also have bases in the northeast and places like Rydale as well. So, you know, we are quite vast. We cover quite a large area, so there's a lot of scope to sort of where you're based in locations. It doesn't matter if you're not sort of based in that particular area, because like Catherine mentioned earlier, people do work from home normally as well, even not under these circumstances. So I'm now 15 months into my training programme. I'm currently studying towards my professional qualification. So once I'm qualified, I'll be a certified internal auditor. So that's globally recognised and a highly respected qualification. So all of the qualifications you'll get from Veritau are very highly respected and very professional qualifications. So they're really good ones to have. So like Catherine mentioned earlier as well, you do get paid study leave to study for your qualifications. So there's, I know in my sort of route, there's 30 days overall that you get off to sort of study. There are 3 assessments in audit and information governance, and I believe 4 in fraud to become qualified. But once you've done those assessments, it's a really, really good qualification to have. And you can also plan your study to suit you as well. So people take study leave sometimes in sort of the week of the exam. Some people take it, sort of dot it around. You can really sort of tailor it to you, do it sort of whenever you want to. And it's also blended with on-the-job learning, which makes it a lot easier. I know when you're sort of at school and looking at textbooks, it can be difficult to see how it's applied in the real world. But with this one, all the studies is completely blended with on-the-job learning. So you can see how it's actually applied in practice in the workplace, which I think makes it easier when you're trying to study and take an assessment or an exam. So I guess my advice to current students or graduates would kind of not get too worked up or worried about not getting a job straight away or applying to sort of too many like I did. And even if you don't think you're not sure about the role, go for it, because I never thought I would be an internal auditor, and here I am, and I'm really enjoying it. So I think it just goes to show, even if it's not an area you initially thought of, or if it's not in your degree field as well, you don't have to, just because you've done like a tourism degree like I did, I don't have to become like a air hostess or something. You know, I'm doing internal audit, which is completely different. So don't be put off by it being different to what your degree is in as well, because we have people at Veritau from all different kinds of degrees. So yeah, I'd encourage anyone who's even sort of remotely interested in the roles offered at Veritau to apply. It really is a great company, very flexible, like we've mentioned, and I've personally thoroughly enjoyed my experience so far. So I guess it's just a little summary of my experience.
All right, thank you for listening. Have we got any questions? We're happy to answer them. And if anybody has kind of more questions, you're welcome to sort of drop us an email. We don't have any vacancies at the moment, but we usually hire somewhere between 5 and 10 graduate trainees throughout the year. So you can keep an eye on our website or follow us on social media to be notified about when we have the next available vacancy.